Hello everyone and welcome to the second episode of the Layer Zero podcast. The Layer Zero podcast takes a deep dive with the builders, investors and developers in the crypto industry. Today I'm joined by Derek Yoo, CEO of Purestake. Purestake is the company behind Moonbeam, an Ethereum-compatible smart contract parachain on Polkadot. Derek, thanks for joining us today. Can you introduce yourself? How did you become involved in blockchain?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me here on the show. I can introduce myself quickly. As you said, I'm Derek. I'm the CEO of Purestake. We're the company is most known for our project Moonbeam, and so when we've been working on that for some time, although we are involved in a couple other things, which we may get to here in the in the interview. My background has really been in building kind of software and technology companies for a long time. That's probably 25 years at this point. I've been kind of working in the technology space since the first internet wave. Series of different startups, including one that achieved some pretty substantive scale, which I think we'll also probably talk about a bit later. So I've been building software, and it's really only somewhat more recently that I've obviously become quite interested in crypto. So that was since the beginning of 2019. I've been pretty much focused fully on on crypto and kind of building kind of infrastructure and products in this space.
Yeah, and so before you started Purestake, what exactly was that company doing that you built?
Yeah, so I'd say that a lot of my experience before, SaaS or cloud, in just from the regular Web 2 space. So, the notable kind of company that I'd started before Purestake was a company called Fuse. So started that with one other guy back in 2006, and I was there for a long time. So I was there for I think 13 years, building that company up over time. So I call it kind of the book of many chapters, right? Kind of from an experience perspective, because we started off the two of us, we kind of grew the business, we got VC kind of funding from some notable VCs, and continue to kind of grow and expand that business. By the time I kind of left at the beginning of 2019 to start Purestake, that had become it was probably about a 700 person company, about a $150 million run rate, enterprise focused cloud business. We had kind of an enterprise sales model there.
Compared to other maybe builders in this space, you have a really strong traditional background. Why did you make the switch to the Wild West of the blockchain industry?
Well, it's a lot more fun for one, I would say. I guess maybe I didn't know that before I started. But I would say, so there is a bit of a story here, right? So, one has to be introduced to this, and I think, you need like enough time, I guess, to even dig into some of this. But really the key thing for me was my co-founder from this company Fuse, that I'd worked with for a long time, right? So we'd worked together for quite some time. He left to start a crypto project. He got very excited about crypto and left. So, his name's Steve Kokinos. He's now the CEO of a project called Algorand, which is based in Boston, like I am. And so, he had met this other guy, Silvio Macaulay, who's a kind of a famous cryptographer. And he got quite excited about blockchain and crypto. Left to start Algorand, and you work with someone for for 15 years, and you kind of we know each other quite well. So he was sharing a lot of that excitement with me and saying, hey, you really got to understand kind of what's happening here. There's this technology that's going to change the way the way kind of value is moved on the internet. It changed the way that financial services are kind of created, consumed, and delivered. And so that I credit him with kind of creating that spark. And then of course, you go on your own journey of starting to read and understand. And, a lot of the work I started actually, with his project Algorand, right? So started, really understanding that since I had, I had someone I could actually speak to about it, right? And kind of ask questions. And, as you learn more and more, then, it became quite clear to me that this was kind of like a once in a lifetime opportunity to kind of get into something that's really going to have a big impact in the world, but at an early stage.
Mm. So in the early days of Purestake, you were mostly building tools for Algorand staking, was it? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think that given obviously the connection there, we really kind of like were working to help support the launch of that network. We were doing work around, and actually we'd continue to provide these services. So like infrastructural work, I'd say. When you come in to blockchain, we kind of had to figure out, okay, well, where do we start? And we had, given this, the traditional kind of Web 2 background we had was not just building software, but specifically in this kind of like a cloud or SaaS like setting. So we had like quite a bit of kind of DevOps and kind of infrastructure expertise. And so that's kind of what we said, hey, like we can help you with this, right? So, kind of work around, running like nodes like on the Algorand network, an API service. We continue to run that. So kind of like the Infura, like for Algorand for developers that want to connect to the network. And so that's just how we kind of contributed to to that network, to launching it, and we continue to do some work in this area. And so I think, but with anything, like you need to start somewhere, and you start with something but you have to kind of put a lot of irons in the fire. That's kind of one of the lessons I would say I learned from previous adventure startups I've been in, is that you have some idea, you're like, okay, this is going to be great. You start, but 9 times out of 10, like, it might not be that the idea is wrong, but at least there's going to be some set of assumptions that were incorrect, basically, right? So you have to start somewhere. You kind of use that as an opportunity to engage and learn, and then you evolve or kind of figure out like where it is you have to move to kind of find product market fit for like whatever your product or services that you're creating.
And then I'm assuming at some time you went from strictly looking at the Algorand ecosystem to deciding to build Moonbeam. How did you come to that decision?
It's a good question. So, I think that, for us, it's a little bit of like the kind of some of the preconceived ideas we came in with, and some of the, I guess, beliefs that we wanted to bet on, that we felt strongly about. And for me in particular, there's a couple things. I would say there's a series of things coming from this kind of Web 2 background into Web 3 that, are kind of striking. Like, and I think they're actually all opportunities for building products and services, but when we kind of went down one particular path. But to just describe what those are, so one of the things that strikes me is kind of the UX, right? And these areas of like the end user experience, I think, are like vastly like underinvested in crypto in general, right? I mean, at Fuse, and you have like a mature kind of Web 2 like mass, product focus on like just regular end users. We probably had like a third of our product, like an engineering staff, were focused on like end user experience kind of questions. And you look like here in crypto, you're lucky if you have like one designer sometimes on like some of these teams, right? It's all like cryptographers and other like back-end engineers. So, but that's actually not the idea we decided to pursue. The other thing that I say I was struck by is that, there was still, even at that time, kind of this idea that, well, it's kind of like a mono-chain kind of like concept, right? Where it's like, okay, you kind of choose your blockchain, you build an app, you like deploy it on that blockchain. And that seemed to me to be not like, based on everything I know, that's like not the way things work. That, the things tend towards specialization. Things tend towards, having, multiple different kinds of even like computer systems or any kind of systems, right? That become specialized into different functions. And that, the ability for these kinds of systems to talk to each other, like the networking layer, is extremely important. And so, when I went, you kind of went to go look, okay, well, how do these blockchains talk to each other? Like, and, how is it that one creates new ones? Those were questions where you kind of like there aren't that many good answers to that. Even so, back in 2019, like you still kind of get led down certain paths where, even for this idea of, okay, I'm going to build a new blockchain, what's the easiest way to do that? I'd still say even today, it's still, you're kind of looking at, let's say, Cosmos SDK and Substrate as like the two ways to do that. I mean, it kind of, in my mind, to build a blockchain from scratch is this like massive effort. And now you have these frameworks that can reduce the energy by a lot. So that was somehow obvious to me that, okay, like this is going to be important, because I liken that to the early days of the web when, in the early days, people would hand roll everything from scratch, basically. They would like build these apps like from scratch. And then these frameworks came along that made it like a lot easier to build like web applications. So I kind of see a parallel there. But then there's also this networking layer. So like, how do these things talk to each other? And you can see there's a lot of innovation happening in this area now, but I would say it's all kind of like layering on top. Like there's like these different bridges and other things that are layering on top. But I think what was clear is that having a native networking kind of capability to be able to connect different blockchains together and have them speak to each other, that was going to be important. And again, I think you get led down. There's only a few areas where that's kind of happening. And so the combination of those two reasons is what led us to Polkadot. Because I think Polkadot has this substrate and this ability to create these specialized chains, and then it has this native like networking layer for these chains to talk to each other. So those seem like two quite critical kind of ingredients or like building like blocks or elements that are needed to build like more complex and kind of like richer systems.
So for those maybe unfamiliar, what exactly is Moonbeam?
Yeah, so Moonbeam. So I think there's a little bit of a story I tell of how we got to it, just explain kind of the rationale. But so we started working in Polkadot with Substrate, and I think what we realized pretty quickly was that our assumptions were correct. That hey, this is like extremely powerful. You can build your own blockchain, you can connect it like via Polkadot with other chains. But I think what we realized is that it's powerful, but it's also like fairly complex. So, to build like a parachain or to use Substrate to build a blockchain, I mean, you're still building a blockchain. It's a lot easier than building one from scratch, but, it's still perhaps not, I call it not for the faint-hearted. And if you're trying to develop an application and don't want to worry about this like lower level infrastructure, it may not be a good fit. So I think what we realized is, hey, there's kind of an opportunity here to create this developer-oriented platform where we kind of the platform takes care of this like kind of lower level infrastructure and allows developers to just kind of focus on their app and kind of like kind of have this higher level, more smart contract like experience. In fact, that's kind of what they're used to, right? Especially people coming from Ethereum. So we kind of said there's definitely room for this. We want to kind of target this developer oriented platform within Polkadot that makes it easier for like developers to deploy applications. And so then we started pursuing that idea. And even within that idea, I would say that, again, kind of from some of our, from the experience, the technology company building experience we have in the past, we looked and said, okay, what are the different approaches people have taken to solve this problem? And, that's where it became clear that, when you look at like Ethereum, the Ethereum, and particularly the technology stack around Ethereum, like is the thing that has like the lion's share of the traction basically in the market right now when it comes to developers. I mean, most apps have been built using this tech stack. It has the most maturity in terms of tooling, like developer tools, other services around it. I mean, it's just a big gap between that ecosystem of tools and anything else. So, we said, look, like this will be a powerful combination to kind of be able to leverage like all that great work that the Ethereum ecosystem like has in terms of tooling and services, but to kind of combine that and marry that with Polkadot, where you have this kind of networked system, right? That can where you can have these specialized blockchains in a network system. So that was kind of the genesis of what led us to this Moonbeam idea, where we wanted to create. Now we've created basically this like a highly Ethereum compatible Ethereum like environment, but that's like attached like as a what they call a parachain is attached as one of these member blockchains into the Polkadot network.
Speaking of parachains, you recently won a parachain slot on Kusama. Was this you were the second parachain slot? Was this kind of your expectation? You expected to be one of the first, or are you surprised to see the community support?
No, I think we're quite pleased with the result. I mean, So there's this auction mechanism to auction off slots, and then in addition, the Moonbeam Foundation ran what's called a crowd loan, which is this kind of way that your community can kind of help support the bootstrapping of a project into one of these slots. And I can only say that we're quite pleased with the result. I think I mentioned it on a couple of the other talks I've given that you kind of work on the software, you work on this project for for us it's been quite some time now, and then you come to these moments where things become real, right? So now there's this like tangibility that happens where your community has to come and express itself like in order for you to even get in one of these seats, and then now there's this that happened and it was successful, and now there's an actual chain that's like producing blocks. So it's pretty exciting, and I think probably the most important thing for me the most impactful thing for me in the whole process was this kind of expression from the community, right? So I mean, you talk about community, it's kind of this abstract thing, and sure, there's a Discord where there's a bunch of messages flying around, but you don't really know who it actually is, right? It's still a little bit like, so I think this is, for me, was quite like, kind of made a big impact on me when you say, okay, well, yes, there is like, a pretty large, I think there was maybe some 8,000 people or something like said, yes, I will support this project, like, getting like one of these spots. So that to me was pretty powerful.
Yeah. So now with Moonriver, your Kusama deployment producing blocks, functionality will slowly start to be added. What does the next few weeks and months look like for Moonriver?
Yeah. So, bit of context there. So, we have 2 deployments, that we're working on, one for the Kusama network, one for the Polkadot network. Our Kusama deployment is called Moonriver, which we've been just talking about, that is kind of in one of these slots now and producing blocks. There is kind of a launch sequence that we're going through, and so what that means is we kind of got into the slot and kind of started producing blocks, but with basically like almost all of the major functionality kind of turned off, right? So it's block production was happening, block finalization was happening, but we kind of had these like feature switches where like basically everything else is turned off. The idea was, look, we just want to take things one step at a time, make sure that things are secure and safe at each step of the way, and then start activating features, piece by piece. And the reason for that is, of course, we just as a company, right, and like kind of one of the philosophies of the project is we need to prioritize the security and kind of safety of the system, before anything else. So by kind of taking this stepwise approach, we can de-risk like any kind of issues or problems that might happen, right? So if we go to one step and we see any kind of behavior we're not expecting or any kind of issues, we can pause there, address the issues before moving on to the next step. So we have it's a 5-step process. There's kind of phases 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We actually just moved from phase 0, where we started, to phase 1. In phase 1, we are in the process right now of onboarding community collators. So we have a set of collators. So these are collators are what for a Polkadot Parachain, they're kind of a key role. They're basically the block producers of the system. And so we've been working with a community of folks providing this collation function on our testnet for some time now, for probably I would say 6 months, maybe something like this. And so we're kind of now in the process of onboarding those collators like onto Moonriver to decentralize the block production. Right now, to start, like it was just Purestake producing all the blocks, and now we're going to kind of give up control of block production, out to this community. And so that's the step we're in now. And then, we proceed on to other steps such as activating, on-chain governance, removing kind of the pseudo key that we have that kind of allows us to do kind of the God key, right, to make any changes we want. And then the last step would be to activate kind of the full functionality transfers and kind of the EVM functionality. And so we're kind of going through that process now. We're in this phase 1, as I said. There's a couple more phases after us, so we're probably let's call it like 4 or 5 weeks. Expect to be through all of these different launch steps.
And so, would it be correct to say after the fourth phase, projects can start to deploy on Moonriver?
Yes, that's right. So and we're working with a number of our kind of ecosystem partners right now to make sure that they're ready to deploy. There's quite a bit of different things that need to be deployed, like right out the gate. In particular, some of the bridging, Oracle, and there's just kind of other. So there's kind of dependencies, right? So if you have a project, you can deploy the project, but it needs some of these other pieces to even, be there to be able to function. So, we're trying to kind of line things up. And so there's going to be, definitely quite a bit of deployment activity right out the gate once we kind of complete this phase 4. And then, and then we're kind of off to the races, right? We'll kind of start to bootstrap kind of the ecosystem on Moonriver.
How quickly do you think after phase 4, do you think we could see like a decentralized exchange on Moonriver or some other kind of DApp?
I think it's going to be in pretty short order. We, obviously have a number of partners kind of in this, particularly in the DeFi kind of area. There's probably, maybe half a dozen different like decentralized exchanges, among others like lending and borrowing protocols, stable coins. So, this is probably the thing that I'm most interested in because, frankly, it's these are some of the DApps that have the highest amount of actual end user engagement, right? So this is like where just look at the numbers, right? Where are people actually like using DApps? And it's like, I would say that this and the NFT areas are the 2 areas that are getting the most traction at this point. And so, yeah, we put a lot of energy into kind of ecosystem building around, in the DeFi area. And, it is a little tricky, right? Because, I mean, there's a lot of technical requirements that we had to meet. So that's one thing, which we might want to dig into. But, there's also this kind of like, there's this spider web of dependencies, right? So all these, DeFi projects, like there's, each one depends on all these other ones. So then there's kind of this weird chicken and egg problem you have where to get like, any particular project to deploy, they need like 3 other projects. So then it's kind of like, well, it's kind of who goes first, right? You need to kind of almost get all these kind of, kind of people that depend on each other to kind of like move all at once kind of thing, right? So that's, that definitely has been like a big, focus of effort. But that's the thing I'm probably most excited about is kind of the activity we're seeing in this area.
Yeah, we've been talking about Moonriver a little bit, but Moonbeam is obviously your Polkadot parachain. Quite a number of projects have kind of signaled that they will be building on Moonbeam. Do you first expect them to launch on Moonriver and then transition over to Moonbeam? Do you think some projects will stay on Moonriver? Do you think some projects will only deploy on Moonbeam? What kind of, you have 2 networks, how do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that there is a mix of responses we've gotten, although I would say that there are, a significant number of projects that will be deploying to both. And I would not say that it's a transition, that they plan to maintain deployments like on both Moonriver and Moonbeam. There's a subset, a minority of projects that might target actually either or. So they might say, you know what, I'm only going to deploy to Moonriver, or like my use case, I need like maximum kind of like economic guarantees. So like I'm only going to deploy to Moonbeam. And so I see, that's kind of the key difference is really the economic value, like, of the network. And so kind of the economic security guarantees that can be provided and the cost, which is kind of comes in hand. That's the key difference between the 2 deployments. But from what I can see, in some ways, we're in the business of providing block space, right? I mean, that's the thing that we have to provide to the market. And what I can see is that there's like quite a lot of demand. So I think that, this block space will be filled on both networks. And I mean, we'll have to see how things play out. I mean, we're kind of following a little bit in, kind of Parity's idea of having these like dual kind of deployments be long-lived and permanent. And, I think I kind of look to what's happening on Kusama versus Polkadot a little bit to kind of, shapes my thoughts a little bit about what might happen. I mean, what I see happening on Kusama and Polkadot is certain kind of use cases might actually be going, kind of might be primary on one or the other. So, for example, there's quite a bit of NFT activity like on Kusama itself. So, those use cases may not require the same degree of economic security, like as like high value loans or what have you. And they might they might be a better home on Moonriver or on Kusama. And then, kind of the larger kind of like more financial use cases, like, may make more sense to be on Polkadot. But these, again, the market will tell us. I think, sometimes it's like you can have whatever ideas you want, but then you get surprised basically by what happens. But that's kind of at least the direction I potentially see things moving in.
Yeah. With all the developer tools and integrations available on Moonbeam, like Chainlink, OpenZeppelin, Remix, MetaMask, The Graph, you're really setting up Moonbeam as a home for EVM projects looking to have some exposure to the Polkadot ecosystem. Moonbeam isn't the only smart contract parachain in the Polkadot ecosystem. How does Moonbeam compare to other projects such as Akala and Asta, formerly known as Plasm?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me divide that into 2 kind of halves, and first talk a little bit about this kind of like tooling. I mean, I already mentioned it a little bit, but what I'd say here is that I think that this was like a big learning that we had as we were building out like our ecosystem and partners was we said, we first said, okay, great. We want to create this Ethereum-like environment. Let's kind of assemble all the pieces that we need. Let's develop pieces that are missing. And then, so we kind of got to this point where we had this like core functioning, right? We had this kind of core Ethereum-like system functioning. I think what we pretty quickly realized after that when we were kind of engaging with partners was that that's not enough, basically. So you can have kind of a, Ethereum-like system, like, a lot of times people will, even on other chains, will just fork Geth, right? They kind of fork Geth and they get an Ethereum-like system there almost for free. I mean, in our case, we have a from scratch implementation in Substrate, but, you can just fork Geth and achieve the same thing. But I think the feedback we immediately got from projects trying to, that we want to work with was like, okay, great that you have that, but our front end relies on the graph. Like we rely on Chainlink or band oracles. We need these other like API API services. We need like we use these deployment tools. Like so there was like this long list of things that like projects came to us and said like we need these other things to be working in order for us to be able to deploy. So that, and I'd say that we achieved this kind of core Ethereum compatibility some time ago, and the last, I'll almost call it like 9 months has been more on kind of working on these other areas, all these like supporting things that are needed that we got feedback from these like early deployment partners. I'll highlight one, like one that was not obvious from the start that we knew we needed was basically to have like an EVM aware block explorer, so people could understand things like ERC20 creations and like smart contract to smart contract calls like that were happening like in different blocks. And that turned out simple to say, but that turned out to be a whole odyssey of we had to create these like debug and tracing RPCs, like, and add support for that in the node, and there was a whole set of engineering work that had to happen in order to make that like possible. So that's kind of the first part of the question is we have a bunch, and we continue to work on expanding this set of like integrations and tools around the platform, largely based on feedback that we're getting from the projects that are deploying to us, and I see that as something that's going to continue like onwards, right? That's it takes quite a bit of work to kind of get all these integrations in place. But getting to the second part of the question that you asked was kind of a little bit of a comparison, I guess, within the Polkadot ecosystem. There are several. I think you mentioned A-Star and is that how you pronounce it, by the way? A-Star, I think. And
I guess we'll find out.
We'll find out. And Akala. So the first point I'd make is that I think we're all friends. I mean, Rutao and Sota are like, we know each other well. We are, that's one thing I would say about the Polkadot ecosystem. It's like, it's quite like a supportive and kind of like friendly place. So yeah, I mean, when we plan, for example, on integrations with both of those like parachains to be able to bidirectionally move, our platform tokens, like, to and from, those two. As far as smart contract functionality goes, I would probably, my take would be that A-Star is, more similar in terms of like the focus to us than Akala, right? So in my mind, Akala is kind of the, they're aiming to be kind of the Terra of like of the Polkadot ecosystem, right? So have like a suite of like actual DeFi products, and they have this kind of idea of like we can make those good by having them be kind of having our own chain, like, and having them be optimized, right? So it's kind of like a similar idea, I think, to the spot that Terra occupies within the Cosmos like ecosystem, where I think that that's I think part of the Polkadot concept is like by having your own chain and specializing it, you can kind of get like advantages that way. And they've obviously done like a tremendous job, kind of getting awareness for their project and building, those products, technical expertise, and so on. But I see that as kind of different than, our idea where, we're aiming to be like a platform. Like we don't have any like end user facing DeFi or other features. Like, we're just like a pure kind of infrastructure project. So if you're a project that like, has like a DeFi product, I think that, this would be something where, I think that if you're looking for a platform, then, that's one thing versus if you're looking for, a product. There's kind of different things in my mind. And like you focus on different things, like when you're trying to build a platform versus you're trying to build a product. So that's kind of the difference I see on that end. With A-Star, I think it's a little bit different where, I would say the key difference is that we're just focused on this like Ethereum and EVM compatibility, and this is where we've been working directly with Parity to kind of push like that compatibility and substrate forward. We're one of the primary contributor outside of Parity to this Frontier repository that like is where we've, by agreement with them, we're putting a lot of this work so that other people can use it. And again, I don't want to speak for A-Star because I'm definitely less familiar, but at a high level, the concept is that there's multiple kind of technology stack choices like on A-Star, right? So There's, EV, this frontier work we've worked on has been incorporated there, so you can use that. But there's also, the Polkadot native ink technology, which is a different smart contract kind of stack. And then there's, some layer two, like integral layer two functionality. So I think that it's kind of a thing where there's multiple different choices over there. So I'd say the key difference is that we're just, 100% focused on this like Ethereum style compatibility, which, just for rationale of why we did that is that's kind of when we went and talked to, a lot of the partners that we're working with, that's what they had expressed like a preference for. So that's why we decided to focus on that.
I saw some of your talks recently, like at the Polkadot Decoded and other events like that, and you seem to suggest Moonbeam as kind of the third option. You have Ethereum as number one, Binance Smart Chain as number two, and Moonbeam as number three. But it seems like recently there's just more and more chains popping up all the time. We even have like a KuCoin chain, we have Huobi Eco Chain. Do you think the ecosystem is getting too fragmented or too pulling in different directions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so here's what I would say first is that the proliferation of these EVM compatible chains is not like that surprising to me because, again, I think one of the premises that even we might have made a bet on like back in 2019 when we started was that, it's less that it's like Ethereum itself but it's this Ethereum technology stack, which is for better, for worse. I mean, I know it has quirks and whatever, but it is basically the de facto standard for building DAPPs. And so I think that the market is kind of like realizing this, right? And saying that, yes, I mean, obviously there's, Ethereum continues to be the place where the most value is, but it's really like, it's kind of this technology stack, which if you kind of create like a deployment environment elsewhere and have some set of users and assets like around that deployment, you're going to get like organic traction. You're going to get like developers building there because it's kind of conformant. It's kind of the standard, right? And this is what we've seen is I think, in my mind, it's kind of like it was first a BSC, got like a lot of traction early in the year. I think then it kind of shifted towards actually like Polygon, I'd say, right? Is like where, more recently there's been a lot of activity. That seems to be perhaps like, on the wane a little bit. And, but, it's just because of this, like this fact that the ETH tech stack is a standard that I think that lowers the friction a lot, basically, right? And so then the question becomes less about the technical friction of like, hey, I need to re-implement my whole DApp in some other tech stack, and becomes more opportunistic. It's about where is it that I can grow my protocol? Where is it that I can find like new users and assets to serve? That's the kind of discussion that like, we've been having with a lot of projects is, these projects are, they're driven by certain goals, right? So especially these DeFi protocols are saying like, look, I need to grow my active users. I need to grow the, either TVL or transaction fees or other things. How do I do that? Like, so I can do that by trying to steal market share from competitors on Ethereum. But I think a lot of people are saying, you know what? Like, I'm going to like, it's much easier for me to go expand, like, and I'm uncontested or like kind of there's much less competition in like some of these other chains. And I think, I had an interesting discussion with Maki from like Sushi the other day, where he was like, well, we were at first quite hesitant to like do this multi-chain expansion because what we thought would be the case is we thought we'd be kind of like splintering ourselves. So we thought that like if we went to other chains, it would be the same users on Ethereum would like, that we already had would kind of transfer their assets to these other chains. And so all we do is kind of splinter ourselves into multiple different parts. He's like, but what we found it's actually new users like on the other chains. Like each chain has its own user base. And it's like, it's much more the case that it's like new users and additives. Like when you go to different chains, you don't lose like the TVL or users from Ethereum, you are gaining like other users. And I think that's correct. I mean, you look at like Polkadot, there's a different set of users like in the Polkadot ecosystem. In fact, I think a lot of them are like not like as DeFi oriented as like, some of the more Ethereum oriented people. So I think, this is something where I think we probably, there's some education that needs to happen even like for people on how to like, be an LP into like an AMM and other things. Like these are not things that like I think a lot of the people that are like in Polkadot have done. So I think but you can see that this is the opportunity is that there's things like even for Moonriver, KSM and like these different assets don't exist on Ethereum. So there's a new set of assets and then there's a new set of users. So it's kind of growth opportunities for these protocols. That's kind of like what I see. And then if you can offer that growth but like minimize the friction and minimize any of the engineering work, it's like, well, okay, so then it's like, it seems to be kind of like a no-brainer, right? Like for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think Binance Smart Chain really kind of opened the eyes of a lot of projects to, how easy it is to bring in a new set of users and things like that. And then from from Binance Smart Chain, now they're looking at Polygon. They're looking at all the different opportunities, right? Like they're very much not just stuck on Ethereum, which is nice. To encourage projects building on Moonbeam or Moonriver, what are your plans to support and encourage these projects? Do you have like some kind of fund or an ecosystem development plan? How are you going to bring people over? How are you going to keep them there?
Yeah, so I mean, first I've mentioned that of course we're kind of a lot of these things are done in partnership with the Moonbeam Foundation, who's the actual kind of entity standing behind the network and running a lot of these programs. But yeah, I'd say that one of the things we have is we do have like a kind of an ecosystem and grants like program. This is something that has been instrumental in helping kind of get traction, like even around the ecosystem partners that we have, these pre-launch like partners who have been developing and testing things on our testnet to be ready for deployments, like onto Moonriver first and then Moonbeam. And then that will continue, right? I mean, the foundation will continue to run a grants like program, to help to help bootstrap things. I would say that the second thing, which is a little bit of a preview, that has not been announced formally yet, is that we are in the planning stages for some liquidity like bootstrapping programs that will help, particularly in this kind of DeFi area, to help bootstrap activity. This is not new. This is something we have been studying kind of programs that have been employed on other in other ecosystems, and I think that that's like a pretty powerful tool that can be used to help bootstrap kind of an ecosystem. So more to come on that, but that's something that is being looked at that the foundation will likely be running. And I think that there's those things, but I think I'd also say that some of it comes down to just good honest like roll up the sleeves kind of like BD work, right? I mean, it's just kind of like getting out to people, talking to them, like helping them understand kind of what the opportunity is, like what So I do think that people tend to underestimate that sometimes. That you just need like a little bit of like hustle and legwork to be the case to just get to projects and kind of establish relationships. And I mean, the ecosystem is still like not huge, right? So it's like I think with a relatively modest team, you can still make a big impact in terms of just like having those like discussions and relationships and kind of building that ecosystem.
Yeah. So Moonbeam's quite unique in that there hasn't been any public sale of tokens, and currently the only tokens with distribution plans are mover tokens from the Moonriver crowd loan. Will there be a public sale of Moonbeam in the future? What are the plans for the Moonbeam token?
Yeah, so again, I'll comment on behalf of the foundation here a little bit, who will be the entity kind of running anything in this area. But there definitely is a plan for a public sale for Glimmer, Moonbeam tokens. That's to happen kind of let's call it like late summer. So that is something that is being planned. Yeah, and I think that there may be other mechanisms too. Like it's still a bit open question whether there'll be a crowd loan as well. On for Moonbeam, I think that it likely is the case, but that's kind of being kind of thought through by the foundation now.
Yeah. So now with almost the first 5 Kusama Parachain auctions complete, do you think we're getting close to the Polkadot Parachain auctions? I hear some people saying could be end of August.
People come and ask me that question as if like I had some sort of special insider knowledge. The fact of the matter is I don't know much more than anyone else who's kind of just been trying to follow and what have you. I think this is just part of like, I guess, Parity's policy, like in Web3 Foundation's policy on these things. My if I were to make a guess, I would say that there's still kind of quite a bit of learning going on, like on the Kusama parachain deployments, and I think that I think that like the surprises and learnings that are happening like need to be ironed out before they'll move forward. So, to give you an example, like we hit an issue even like last week where we attempted like a democracy, a kind of an on-chain governance based like upgrade like of like the Moonriver parachain, which is the way that I think parachains are expected to do things. I think we were the first team to try this, and like we hit an issue, so hit like a bug basically that was, I mean, obviously Parady's been great, like so they've been extremely supportive. They're right there. We kind of the Kusama like a technical committee kind of stepped in to like to help us out and like fix it. But I think there's still some. It's a quite complex system, and I think that as these first chains come to life, there's still going to be some some learning. So I would so my expectation is that will be given a chance to play out a little bit. And then once this is kind of the whole concept around Kusama is like, let's use this as like a real network with real value to prove things out. And so I think that's kind of happening now. So I would expect, kind of as you say, that once any kind of bumps or surprises kind of like smooth out, then that's when like they'll it will proceed to like to Polkadot. And I think that the timing you mentioned is probably correct, something like that.
So especially on Binance Smart Chain, we saw a number of scams pop up that tarnish the name of BSC. This is also happening now on Polygon, KuCoin chain. It happens across every chain. Is this something you're concerned about with Moonriver and Moonbeam? Is there anything that you're planning to kind of reduce these potential issues?
No, it's a good it's a good question. I mean, so yeah, am I worried about it? Like, yes. I mean, so you have these permissionless systems that obviously is a great source of strength and a great that censorship resistance is part of the core idea, right? You remove that and you've removed a lot of the key value of like the system itself. But a lot you get kind of a mix sometimes of like who it is that takes advantage of those features. So I don't think that some sort of like censoring thing is like not necessarily that's not something that we'll be able to do and keep with like the principles that are kind of driving like the the idea and the development in the first place. So I think that like the best that we can do is provide like the right like transparency supporting infrastructure, so that like just end users can be as educated as possible. So we will be helping to support that. We have some new, for example, Explorer kind of like options that will be coming online later in the summer that I think will help with that kind of visibility. I think that we are taking pretty rapid steps here to decentralize the network, so it won't be the case that we'll even be able to that the foundation will be able to directly intervene on some of these things, unlike other chains which kind of are retaining like a more centralized control over things. I mean, so we are pretty serious about giving that up as quickly as possible. But that doesn't mean that we can't use on-chain governance, right, to do what we feel is the right thing. So we are prepared to do that if there's some clear case of something that requires like some form of on-chain governance oriented like intervention to rectify something. Like we will do what we believe is right in that regard. But yeah, those are some of the thoughts there.
Yeah. So it seems like NFTs are starting to get popular again. Trading volumes are up and things like that. And Moonbeam supports ERC-721 tokens. So what can you tell us about NFTs on Moonbeam and Moonriver? What projects can people, or what can people do with their NFTs?
Yeah. So, well, obviously, the first point I'd make is, what you kind of already mentioned, which is that, that's the great, as part of this kind of Ethereum compatibility strategy is that, all, you kind of don't have to recreate the wheel, right? So all of these standards that like already exist and are well understood and supported by, a whole ecosystem of tools and other things like, can be leveraged. So that's 721s, 755s. I would say that while the primary kind of like internal BD focus has been on is just been in DeFi because that's where the most projects have been that are deploying. We are definitely seeing traction and activity in like the NFT area. So we have like a number of projects that like will be deploying. That are offering either creator platforms or bridging infrastructure that's NFT specific or marketplaces. So we will have that. I would say that that's the second thing that I'm most bullish on after DeFi. And in fact, like even to categorize things like that is a little bit not quite correct because what I see now is that there's all the line between those two categories is not necessarily so clear. There's a lot of projects that is it an NFT project or is it a DeFi project? You kind of might be one or the other depending on which way you kind of squint or which way you look at it. So, this is where you kind of see that there's not like discrete categories; they're all kind of connected. And even back to that broader idea of like, well, do NFT use cases go to reside on Moonriver versus more heavy duty DeFi use cases on Moonbeam? You still need like the DeFi infrastructure like on Moonriver anyway, right? To like even have like the NFT kind of projects require that even I think to be functional. So this is where kind of everything is tied together. But yeah, I see kind of quite a bit of innovation here. I kind of see this as that NFTs like it's open this like new design space. There's this new canvas to paint on that is like pretty much still pretty blank and wide open, right? So I think with fungible tokens and kind of these DeFi use cases, it's still pretty open, but it's perhaps a few chapters like further along in terms of different ideas, different things that are kind of tried and true at this point. Whereas with NFTs, I see it as still like pretty early, and there's a lot more that's going to come. I'm pretty sure.
What would be the dream project for you to launch on Moonbeam or Moonriver, aside from Uniswap, of course?
I'm not going to hold my breath on that one, but I think that I'm pretty pleased by like the traction that we've gotten. I mean, and actually, not all there are a number of other collaborations that are in our pipeline that are not public yet that I unfortunately I can't disclose right now, but that you'll see in the coming weeks here. We have been engaging with like extremely like high quality teams that are going to be deploying that I think will really bootstrap this kind of like DeFi ecosystem. So that's a little bit of news news to come. But I think the thing that I'm also that we are going to spend some more time on like as we launch would be I think a lot of our energy has been on engaging with teams, these kind of like pretty sophisticated and larger teams that are pursuing these multi-chain expansions. But I do also see like a pretty big opportunity for us on the what I'd call kind of the native / organic kind of side of things, right? Because again, the original idea was that kind of building in substrate is great, but like not necessarily a good fit for everyone. And I think once we launch, I think we're going to be the easiest place to like bootstrap like a new project if you just want to get something off the ground quickly. I mean, if you're trying to even just launch like an ERC20, I mean that's obviously just as easy as it will be on BSC, Polygon, or anywhere else basically. And so to try to like help support good quality like new teams that are trying to build something new, and maybe they even have a plan ultimately to be like a full parachain, but a lot of teams aren't starting there. So I think that's something that I'm pretty interested in, is kind of being a great place where people can kind of bootstrap themselves and start off that are like looking to build like Polkadot native applications.
We had a nice DeFi summer last year, and then probably Binance Smart Chain season, now kind of Polygon season. Are we coming up to Polkadot summer?
We'll see, I guess, right? So I'm quite hopeful that let's put it this way, right? I think that the potential of Polkadot is like about to be open. It just like hasn't been open, right? So there's been this relay chain asset. There's obviously quite a bit of interest in the in terms of developer activity and in terms of just people being interested in the project. But I feel like it's really the launch of these parachains that like allows like the network to express itself at its full potential. And so I think that like that's that should lead to like a next wave of like interest and innovation, like as like that additional design space is kind of opened up and people can kind of express themselves, right, and to the market. And like I said, I do think that, the reason we made a bet here in Polkadot is that, my belief is that it has this underlying structure that's going to be, quite a big advantage in the long term. That structure being that, you kind of have this like built-in native networking layer that allows, you to speak with other projects. I do think that is like a pretty big advantage that is not really appreciated that well now. And I think so. So I think as these like parachains come up, as you start to see deployments, I think that on the long run, this like underlying structural better infrastructure, I'd say, is going to like yield like long-term advantages. So that's why we continue to be quite bullish on on what the long-term prospects are here.
So speaking of long-term prospects, last question: where will Moonbeam Moonriver be in 6 to 12 months? What's your goal, and where do you think you're heading?
Right. So I would say, well, I mean, we haven't launched Moonbeam, so like we'll definitely want to have launched that on schedule. So that's one other important milestone in there. But I think for me, it would be, what I would consider successful is if, a year from now, if there is kind of this like growing and kind of organic like ecosystem that's kind of come to life on both Moonriver and Moonbeam. That's the thing that, I see kind of our role is just kind of like helping guide that, but we can't be that, right? I mean, that comes from, actual projects and communities kind of finding utility in like this new space that's been created to express themselves. And so I think, that's the thing that I'll consider success is if, through kind of the creation of this new kind of space and through, just some of the from the side supporting activity that we can do if, there's just like real organic activity like on both platforms and real, which will express itself in terms of like transactions, perhaps TVL in like protocols, other things. That's what I consider success, and I'm quite optimistic about that, given even like where we've gotten to. I mean, effectively pre-launch here, right? I mean, we've already made quite a bit of progress, I would say, in helping make sure that happens.
Derek, thanks so much for joining the Layer Zero podcast. Where can people find more information about Moonbeam and Moonriver?
So I think best place would probably be, I'll start with the websites. So that's moonbeam.network is a great place to start that actually has information about both networks. We're pretty active, on Telegram as well as, Discord. Discord is really where the more, if you're a developer, the more technical discussions or people have questions about how the system works, that's probably the best place to go. And Don, thanks for having me, on the show here.
Thank you.